Does Tennessee's offense have a seasonal cold or an incurable disease? Either way, the Big Orange looked very pale in a dreadful 19-14 loss at Arkansas. So we're going to try to diagnose their illness and determine whether there's a cure. We're going to do that just as the Florida Gators come to town. Welcome to the Volunteer State. I'm Tennessee beat writer Adam Sparks, along with John Adams of the Knoxville News Sentinel. Nothing worked offensively for the Vols in Fayetteville. Nico Iamaleava looked bad. His offensive line looked worse. And the coaches didn't seem to have a solution for their struggles. So, John, let's talk about it. I want to start here. When you were watching the Arkansas game, like in real time, and you were trying to put together who's at fault for this, the offense looks atrocious. Could barely get into the end zone, didn't score in the first half. Worst half of offense I've seen under Josh Heupel to date. When you were trying to diagnose this, like in real time, who was at fault initially to you? Like, was it Nico? Was it coaches? Was it O-line, wide receivers not getting open? Like, what was the order of fault for you in real time? And in the last few days, has your perspective changed on who was to blame?
Well, it was a joint effort, I would say. All of the above might be the answer. It's hard for me. I was watching on television, so it's hard for me to see about the receivers, whether they're beating the coverage or not. But the overriding issue to me seemed to be two things. The offensive line wasn't blocking, and once that happens, it's hard to make anything work effectively. Then there was just Nico obviously was confused. What he was seeing on the field, he seemed baffled by it. And Josh Heupel's look on the sidelines reflected that confusion. He seemed confused. He seemed unsure of how to approach this. So I don't know. How to cure it. It's almost like as though you need exploratory surgery to kind of get in there and and
we're sticking with the medical theme here. I like it.
Yeah, you kind of look around and see what was going on, but it was a collaboration on all fronts. I always at the start of a game, I don't know, this may be meaningless, but I've just found when the offensive line doesn't come off the ball well and isn't creating space there for its running backs early in the game, I always wonder how ready a team is to play. That to me is kind of a signal. Tennessee's offensive line's been good for the most part this year. It was great against weaker competition, certainly. Not as good against an elite Oklahoma defense, but in the Arkansas game, I didn't think of Arkansas as having the defensive talent that Oklahoma did. And Tennessee wasn't blocking those guys. But one of the other things I noticed with Nico, the confusion extended to his running. He's not the quarterback I expected to see as a runner. I go back to the Citrus Bowl last year when he made those quick, decisive cuts, scored 3 touchdowns against a good Iowa defense. He just didn't look like that. He didn't look like it against Oklahoma, and I thought, well, the feel was bad. It was an awful feel. Couldn't get your footing, but he didn't seem to have his footing against Arkansas either. So that was there was no running game from the quarterback. And that was a factor too. So I really haven't I haven't got any closer to diagnosing this. Maybe you have.
Well, I mean, so in real time watching it in Fayetteville, I thought it was number one issue was offensive line. Number 2 issue was Nico confused, and then I wasn't sure on coaching. I don't say I flip-flop those since then, but I now go O-line coaching Nico because they couldn't do anything because the offense couldn't block, particularly the tackles, even some of the tight ends, even some of the running backs. When you have 6 guys blocking 3 and there's still pressure, it doesn't work. You also can't run the ball, by the way, because Nico's looking at the numbers over there and he sees 3-4 guys in the box. The math tells him he's good. And then once you snap the ball and he's feeling pressure, even if he's throwing it, if he's feeling pressure from his backside and he's thinking, wait, I have a tackle over there and a tight end, or I have a tackle and a guard and a tight end, or I have a tackle and a guard and a running back, and there's one guy over there that they're blocking. Why am I feeling this pressure from my backside? That guy shouldn't be anywhere near me. And he was. If you look at the last play, I'm sure a lot of people have replayed that last play of the game where Nico inexplicably ran out of bounds. Joe Milton did it 3 years ago. Nico did it this time. It's even in his explanation, it's hard to understand that the ball was slipping in his hand, whatever. He was flush to the right. Most of his receivers were to the left of the play. The reason he was flush to the right was at the snap of the ball, Landon, no, it wasn't Landon Jackson. He was on the other side, but a defensive end was coming on Nico's left side, and the guard and the tackle, there was a double team over there, I believe, or maybe it was a tackle and a running back. Either way, one guy blew past two. And so Nico had to immediately get flushed to his right. He's got 4 receivers running and 8 guys covering them. I know that's a different situation. It's the end of the game. You're trying to defend the end zone, but that's sort of a microcosm of him getting pressure from 3 guys when he's supposed to have 5 or 6 blocking, and then looking out there and thinking, why does every receiver have 3 guys around him? So the numbers game all came from sort of the offensive line issues. And I put a lot of fault on the coaches, because you should look at that and say, we suck at this and we suck at that, but we're good at this other thing. So let's do the other thing. And they just didn't seem to. It's almost like they couldn't accept their vulnerabilities within the moment. Their vulnerabilities were left tackle and right tackle, and the fact that their quarterback was looking at something that he hadn't. He didn't know what he was looking at. So I want to just hit each of these topics, and I know there'll be some overlap, but let's look at the O-line first. So I've been seeing some of these clips of Tennessee's offensive line the last few days circulating over social media. A lot of Lance Hurd, some of John Campbell. Let me talk about Hurd first. I think and maybe we're guilty of this, of building this guy up a whole lot. He looked terrible in the game the other day. But I think we have to remember, we've talked a lot about him about being an LSU transfer and a 5-star. He was a 5-star recruit. He didn't start at LSU. Like, he was a backup at LSU. The reason he's at Tennessee is because LSU has 2 NFL offensive tackles. So there was no way for him to get on the field. So he was the 3rd tackle, and a distant 3rd tackle. So he went to the portal and came to Tennessee. He's a sophomore. He hasn't started before. I do think he's got talent. He certainly got size. But Tennessee's other offensive linemen are 3 or 4 years older than him. So he is the young guy. He's by far the most inexperienced guy, and he's the most out of shape guy, I think, which is a big part of that. Lance Hurd hadn't played for like a month before that game the other night, and he's the only guy of those starting 5 that are experiencing tempo for the first time. They didn't run a lot of tempo, but there was some. And so he was injured in the preseason. He's missed time because of injuries in the season. He hasn't played a lot of snaps in this offense. He's inexperienced. Anything that a defense does to confuse the offensive line, he's going to be the most confused, because he is the least experienced. And so some of the issues that Lance Hurd is experiencing are explainable. Others where he's just getting beat by a guy, that's a factor in the 4th quarter. It's not in the 1st quarter when you're getting beat. And so I don't think they're going to abandon him and like go to Dane Davis. You may see a little more Dane Davis roll in this next game, but they just have to work through the Lance Hurd thing, because he's your starting left tackle now. He may be the only offensive lineman. I mean, these other guys are all seniors. He's probably your only guy coming back next year. So you've got to stick it out with him, get him better, get him more into shape. John Campbell is what he is. He's also a little bit out of shape. He's been injured. I think he's going to be like at 80% at best the rest of the year. But I just don't think there's an easy fix there unless you go to 2 tight ends, which we may get to this. But the Florida game, I think you're going to see a whole lot of 2 tight ends, because they have to help him. Every SEC defensive coordinator looked at that film and thought, well, we have a guy that can beat him. and so I think you're going to have to help Lance Hurd the rest of the year.
Adam, bigger picture here. This was supposed to be an area of strength for Tennessee with obviously Tennessee invested some NIL money in this offensive line, kept it intact as much as it could with 3 starters returning. And then it adds Lance Hurd. I looked at him as he was highly acclaimed, and yeah, it's understandable he couldn't beat out Emory Jones or Will Campbell. Those guys are both regarded as first round draft picks. So he was a backup. So everything made sense. It made sense for him to leave LSU. It made sense for Tennessee to try and sign him through the portal. But if what you thought was pretty solid for area of offense now becomes fragile, that's a huge problem to try and remedy on the fly, because we know Tennessee doesn't have great depth in the offensive line. You're kind of stuck with what you got for the most part, and then that makes your quarterback vulnerable, obviously. So I don't know. You say just kind of got to play through this. That could be a challenge, couldn't it?
Yeah. When your most important offensive lineman, who is always your left tackle, when your most important is your worst, that's a problem, and they've got to figure out how to get away from it. Also, your lesser guard is also on that side. So left side's a problem. They're going to have to do something to help the left side. Maybe Dane Davis does play some more. I think he can play a little. I don't think he starts, but we'll see. So let's go to the more of the headliner, which is Nico. I've seen a lot of blame thrown on Nico. I've seen a lot of people the last few days, a lot of fans sort of diagnose him as like, why isn't this guy a rah-rah guy? Why he looks weak? He looks shell-shocked. Why doesn't he, grab somebody and shake them during the game? Well, a week ago or a month ago or whatever, we were praising that as like this California cool, calm, even keel, doesn't get rattled type of guy. So now for us to think, well, now he's got to have these crazy emotions. You're looking at the same guy, but one of them is after a win, one of them's after. That's how we react to everything. Here's how I would diagnose some of what Nico saw. Maybe this is a bad analogy, but I'll give it a shot. So, John, I'm not a great public speaker. I can do it, but I'm okay at it. The difference in me being a pretty good public speaker and a terrible one is if I know what I'm talking about. If you put me up in front of a room of people, I'm talking to the Kiwanis Club in Knoxville next week. This is what we're doing right now, I guess, is a form of public speaking. But we're talking about Tennessee football, which I can do. And I have notes in front of me, and I have talking points, and I know this because I do it for a living. So if you ask me to talk about Tennessee football for 20 minutes, I can do it, no problem. If you put me up in front of a room and then say, actually, we're going to completely change the topic and we're going to change the audience and go, I can't do that. I'd be awful at that. Nico thinks he's going to see one defense. There's plan A and there's plan B and there's plan C. He's being told during the week, Nico, you've seen this before. We think you're going to see this. Nico, if you don't see that, you're going to see this, and so we'll go to plan B. And if you don't see either of those, you may see this other thing, and so we'll go to plan C. Well, then he gets out there and it's Q. It's not A, B, or C. It's Q. They're running a 3-2-6, which is 3 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and a dime package, 6 defensive backs. And Tennessee has already had trouble with a 3-man front, a 3-3 they had trouble with in the Oklahoma game. This is a 3-2-6 as a base defense. They've seen it, but it's weird. I can't imagine in high school in California he saw any defense close to that. He was on the 7-on-7 circuit, a whole lot. As a 5-star quarterback, you obviously don't see that at all because it's 7-on-7. And so when you put him out there, he's looking at things and thinking, this doesn't make any sense. even if I've prepared a little bit for it, the numbers don't add up. He's coming off the Oklahoma game where he would look in the tackle box and think he'd see 5 guys. And so he's supposed to do something based on seeing 5 guys. And then when the ball is snapped, safeties are running downhill. And by the time he gets the ball in his hands, 5 guys in the box is actually 7 guys in the box. And now the whole plan's got to change in a split second. So teams are doing a really good job of disguising things. They're also confusing his offensive line with some of their looks with their fronts. And he's having to diagnose all these things that he has never seen before while his offensive tackles are getting beat and he's getting put on the ground. And it's just I feel for him a little bit. I know he's making a lot of money in NIL. I know he's a 5-star, and I know we have propped him up to some extent on this. But I think we're seeing the redshirt freshman part of this. He's a 5-star talent. He's also a redshirt freshman, and you have to take both of those into account. And the redshirt freshman part is where opponents are now finding a vulnerability in him, in that he has not played a lot of complex football, because almost nobody that age has played a lot of complex football, and he's getting slowed down. And I think that's pretty much it. He can still make those throws. He can still run it if they'll give him an opportunity to run it, but he doesn't know what he's looking at, and they have to fix that before he can do anything else.
I like your public speaking analogy, except as you pointed out, Nico's getting millions of dollars. The Kiwanis Club isn't paying you
You don't
hundreds
know
of
that,
thousand
John.
dollars to speak. I hope it's not. I hope it has makes better use of its money. But here's the thing: before we know how talented Nico is as a passer, there's no debating that. He makes throws a lot of guys in the NFL can't make. A Freudian slip with NIL, NFL. There's some commonality there, and both play for pay. I wondered how Nico would perform under pressure when things don't go well. He hasn't been in a close game. I wondered how he would handle that. The Oklahoma game wasn't really close. I know the final score was only a 10-point deficit, but anybody watching the game didn't think of that as a nail biter. They thought of it. Tennessee kind of had the game in hand. Oklahoma came back at the end and made it closer. But in this game, Nico was under pressure from a pass rush, maybe under pressure from not knowing exactly what he was facing in terms of defensive alignment. And then there was a pressure that was obvious to everybody on the scoreboard. You're getting beat, you're losing. This is where you think of a supreme athlete making a play. And that's what I found a bit disappointing. Instead of making a play, the last play reflected that he just runs out of bounds. There's no explanation. There's no reasonable explanation. The ball slipping in my hands has nothing to do with that. You had to know going into that play, you've got to chuck the ball. This is it. There's no tomorrow. There's no time to run out of bounds. You have to make a play. And he didn't handle that. So I'm not concerned about him being fiery. That's not his personality. That's not, Joe Montana wasn't fiery. He was pretty good under pressure, though. There are other quarterbacks like that come to mind. So I'm fine with his personality, but I didn't think he handled the pressure well. And in his decision making, not just if he didn't know what to do as a thrower, as an athlete, as a playmaker, he couldn't make a play. And I'm thinking about in terms of running. He looked indecisive as a runner when he scrambled, and that surprised me. I think of him again. I go back to the Iowa game. He just looked very decisive in what he was doing on the run, and that's kind of how I evaluated him and kind of expected to see. Well, this guy, everything around him might break down, and this guy's going to make a play, a run, a pass, and he didn't do that. So that's kind of my concern with his play against Arkansas.
Yeah, I think you have to simplify some things for Nico right now. I think that when they saw what he did against lesser opponents early in the season, I think even the coaching staff got overconfident and thought, we had this guy in the 100 level course, and we were starting the 200 level course at NC State. Well, let's just jump right to grad school because this guy's got it all. And I think they got just too far ahead of themselves with that. The first play of the game, there was like a little fake jet sweep or end around or something to Squirrel, and then Nico rolled to his right, and it looked like he had two reads, a short throw, long throw, and he hit Dante Thornton. It was negated for a penalty, a stupid penalty, which told the story of the day. I think we could have turned the game off right then. But that was simple. Roll to your right, look short, look long, throw it. I think so. I'm seeing it in the stadium, so I'm seeing a bigger picture of the field. And his receivers were not getting open very much, but there was 2 or 3 plays where he threw an incomplete pass where 2 seconds before that, there was a guy open short. It was going to be a 6-yard gain, 8-yard gain. It was a running back. It was a tight end. It was somebody coming across on a drag route or something. There were dump downs there. There were check downs there, and he didn't take them. And I do think those successes in early games sort of put it in mind that he could hit more home runs than he's going to in SEC play. And I think they have to drill it back into him. Be simple, settle, throw the ball short. And if have a 1 receiver, a 2 receiver, and then run it. I think you're right to say that they should probably have some more quarterback runs for him. Early in the season, we would say don't run him too much because he could get hurt and then he's not there for Alabama or Georgia or whatever. Now I feel like the pendulum has gone too far the other way, where they haven't run him. They're not running him at all. I mean, Citrus Bowl, he had three rushing touchdowns, and now you don't even see a quarterback run for him. And so if you get to the end of the year and you say, well, Nico stayed healthy, but you're 8-4, what difference does that make? So I think they have to get a little bit back to simplifying things for him, a quick read, run the ball, get to your tight end, throw it to the running back, just easier things. And they have to drill into him to settle for check downs. All right. So let's get to I guess, blame number 3, coaching. John, if you remember all the way back to the NC State game, Tennessee won that one in a landslide. Dave Doran, the NC State coach, came into the postgame press conference and asked him some question about what Tennessee, how Nico was, I believe is what I asked. And Dave said, well, Tennessee came out and they played something we had not seen on film at all. They were in 2 tight ends, which, by the way, they should probably be in 2 tight ends against Florida this Saturday. But he said, we looked on film, we saw everything they did, and they came out and they did something we had not seen them do before. And that really got us behind, and we had a hard time adjusting to it. The same thing happened to Tennessee these last 2 games. They looked on film and thought, well, Oklahoma, they're not going to be in a 3-man front. Well, first play, they're in a 3-man front, and then they continue to do that. Arkansas, same thing. We talked about the 3-2-6. They saw something on film. They prepared for something on film, and then they came out. And Oklahoma and Arkansas coaches both said after those games, we installed a completely different scheme just for Tennessee. There's a respect factor there in that Tennessee's offense is so feared that you have to sort of scrap your defense and have a plan just for Tennessee that week. And it's worked 2 weeks in a row. Tennessee has not adjusted to it. And, I'll look back at Sam Pittman. Sam Pittman sort of tipped his hand last week. I thought this was a throwaway quote, but in retrospect, it wasn't. Sam Pittman on his Monday press conference, I think it was Monday last week, he was asked something about how Oklahoma slowed down Tennessee a little bit. And Sam Pittman said, yeah, they did show us some things in their scheme that certainly some things we've taken into account in putting together our scheme. And you're thinking, for all those coaches and analysts that Tennessee has on that staff over there, they should probably have one that watches the opposing coach's press conference because Sam Pittman basically said, yeah, that Oklahoma thing, we're going to do that. So Tennessee, just don't watch your previous film. None of that. Just rewatch Oklahoma because that's what we're going to do. And of some version of that is what they did. So I put a lot of this on coaches on the issues with the offense because they should have been more prepared. They should have been able to adjust more within the game. Even Dane Davis this week, we talked to him, the backup tackle who starts sometimes, and he said a 3-man front is not something we've never seen before. We've seen it before. They thought Florida played it some last year, which maybe should be a little bit of an alarm to Tennessee. He said we've seen that before. It shouldn't fool us in the way that it did, but it certainly did. And you've got a quarterback that doesn't know what he's looking at, a left tackle and sometimes a right tackle who can't block it, and a running back who is sometimes going to the wrong side to protect. And you've just got a lot of issues there. And the coaches have to look at that in game and again say, we suck at these things, but we're maybe good at this other thing. Let's just do this other thing. And I felt like I felt like at some point somebody needed to go into the coaching booth and, pull Joey Halsley aside and say, listen, buddy, that ain't working. What you're trying to do, it's not working. And your tackles are bad today. They're really, really bad. And you've got to do something to help them and get out of this game. And they did that at the beginning. Their plan at the beginning of the second half was good, but they couldn't replicate it. And I know they know 1,000 times more X's and O's than you and I. But it was pretty clear to me that they never came up with a plan to combat it. And in a 60-minute ball game, you have to do that. So I put a lot of this on coaching, that they should have seen their vulnerabilities. And moving forward, they have to know what those are. Whatever the offensive plan was coming into the year, I won't say you scrap that completely, but I think you have to sort of reboot and say what we thought we were, we probably aren't, and go with a new plan and figure out how to win games.
Yeah, that's what coaching is all about. I mean, everybody has a plan, but things change. You have to be able to adapt and adjust. Tennessee has an army of coaches, as does every major college team, with quality control guys. You need to study your own tendencies going into a game. If they do this, we do that. You have all these options you should have, and you adjust. Tennessee really didn't adjust. It was as though it froze. It was as though it expected to be able to do one thing and then it couldn't. And that's one of the reactions to anxiety. One of the three, you fight, flight, and freezing. And they froze, it looked like to me. They couldn't run out of the stadium. And if you get in a fight, you get penalized. So they froze. It was just a really bad look. But it's not as though Arkansas was allowed to play 12 men on defense. I mean, there's teams are always going to do different things, and then it's up to you to adjust. And that's where the problem came. Tennessee didn't adjust. So we have to wonder, well, is Tennessee just married to this approach? And no matter what, this is what it has to implement. Success, failure, whatever, it just keeps doing that. Maybe you can get away with that if you've got an athletic advantage and talent in every position. But clearly, Tennessee doesn't have that. So now we're left to wonder what's next.
John, I'm sure you've gotten this question a lot this week. I certainly have, of Alex Golish. Like that's when everything changed. Maybe it was Hendon Hooker, maybe those players, but a lot of people are on the Alex Golish part of this, that he left for South Florida 2 seasons ago, and since then the offense hasn't been what it could be. Last year we said that was quarterback, going from Hendon Hooker to Joe Milton. I will say there's some credence to that. I looked back at since Alex Golish, so we're looking at the last 2 seasons, Tennessee against power conference schools. So basically all their SEC schools plus NC State, Virginia, Iowa in the bowl game. Those games, there's 13 of those, 13 power conference opponents. On offense, Tennessee has been what I would call good in 6 of those. And they've been good, not necessarily bad, sometimes bad, but not good in 7 of those. So you're about 50-50. And that's not what this offense is supposed to be. This offense is supposed to be 80% good. Maybe you're not good against Georgia. Maybe you have some other outlier, but you're supposed to be good in about 80% of the games on offense. They've been about 50-50 since Alex Golesh left, since Hendon Hooker left, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, on down the list. So is this an Alex Golesh problem that you lost your offensive coordinator and you haven't been able to replicate what he did? Here's my and this is speculative at best, I guess, but I don't know that Alex Golesh knows football or X's and O's or schemes or something any better than anybody on that staff right now. I mean, Josh Heupel, this is Josh Heupel's offense. I would venture to say Josh Heupel knows offense better than any of his assistants, past or present. But I do know this. Alex Golesh was abrasive, and Joey Halzle, I would say, is more agreeable. That's not necessarily positive or minus personality traits. That's just what they are. And Josh Heupel does like to have a collaborative type game plan. I mean, it's his offense, but they all get in a room, and the O-line coach and the wide receivers coach and the offensive coordinator, who's also the quarterback's coach, they all get together and they come up with a plan. And then the play caller calls it. Right now, I think it's still Joey Halzle, but who knows? But what they did lose in Alex Golesh is, I think Alex Golesh is the guy who didn't mind at all just telling the others on the staff what he thought and sticking to that and not being as agreeable. And I wonder, in games like the one we saw the other night, it probably would have helped if there was a guy that just yelled at the rest of them and said, "Shut up, we're doing this," or "Shut up, we're not doing that." Yeah, I know you're telling me, position coach, I know you're telling me your guy can do that. Your wide receiver, you're telling me your wide receiver can get open on that route. He can't. I know, O-line coach, you're telling me your tackle can block that. No, he can't. I just saw it. He can't. We're not doing that. I'm not going to believe you when you tell me what your player can or can't do, because I can see it with my eyes. Again, a lot of speculation in there, but the personalities seem to lead me to maybe that conclusion, that that's what they're missing. That can be, you can work around that. And Joey Halzle knows a lot of football and a lot of scheme. I think they've just got to be, they've just got to work quicker and probably a more streamlined during a game to adjust. Because I do wonder if there's a lot of voices on the headset and nobody necessarily is muting everybody else and moving forward.
Well, Adam, you said it. It's Josh Heupel's offense. To me, he's the one that's got to mute everybody else. He's the one that's got to say, this isn't working. Our tackles can't block their guys, or our receivers can't get open, or Nico can't read that defense. We got to do something different. To me, that it's incumbent upon the head coach. He's the one making $9 million or so a year. So just because Alex Golesh isn't here, that doesn't give a pass to Josh Heupel. He's the one that's got to be in charge and decisive in those situations. So if your speculation, and it's a good speculation, I can't be sure it's right or not, who knows? But if you're right, though, I mean, that's on Josh Heupel to me, not on Joey Halzle or the assistant coaches, regardless of their personalities.
Yeah, and that's the best guess I have, because I'm basing it on what I know, and I do know their personalities. I don't. You put an exam in front of them and see who can draw up plays on a board. I don't know who wins that between Golesh and Halzle and whoever else. But that's the difference in personalities. Good cop, bad cop. And Alex Golesh was a really bad cop in a good way. And I don't know if you necessarily have that element on that staff right now. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's not. Just fix it in a week, and it's just a speed bump rather than a roadblock with this. So, John, let's jump to Florida. It's strange we've talked so much about the Arkansas game, and this is Florida week, but one problem leads into other questions. So, John, if we look back at this game like a month ago, I think we would all say Well, Billy Napier may or may not even get to Knoxville. He may be fired before he even gets. They beat a bad Mississippi State team. They beat UCF the other day. Take either of those for what it's worth, but they've won a couple. It looks like Billy Napier may hang around for a little while longer. Also, there's a brutal schedule coming for Florida in November. I don't know why you would even put that on any kind of interim coach to just get bludgeoned by 50 in four straight games. But Florida has a little more confidence now. They have a little more stability, and I can feel this. I can feel this trepidation, this nervousness, anxiety from Tennessee fans because they already know there's a hex around the Florida game. Even though Tennessee won in Neyland last time, there's still a hex in the Florida game. And now Tennessee suddenly is not good on offense. At least right now, lately they're not. And so I can feel a little bit of anxiety coming from Tennessee fans. Are you feeling the same way about this Florida game as you did a month ago, or should Tennessee fans be nervous?
Well, I think some Tennessee fans are nervous when they see Florida, regardless of the circumstances.
Right.
Maybe a few more have joined them in their nervousness after the Arkansas loss. I look at Florida. Florida's a little better than I thought it was. However, I thought in preseason this was a sure win. This was not a game I even looked at as an upset possibility. Playing in Neyland against a team that there's no way Tennessee would overlook Florida. Not when you've lost 17 of the last 19 games. Not when your fans say all the time, well, it doesn't matter how bad Florida is, it'll still find a way to, to beat Tennessee. Think of all the coaches who've gotten fired at Florida who beat Tennessee. Will Muschamp never lost to Tennessee. Jim McElwain had a winning record against Tennessee. Dan Mullen dominated Tennessee. Of course, he was matched up against Jeremy Pruitt, and that certainly helped him. But and Heupel has lost to he lost last season to Billy Napier. That was an unexpected loss. So there's certainly reason for trepidation. However, watching Florida, I've seen 3 of its games. It has gotten a little better. However, the Mississippi State has no defense. It's the worst team in the SEC. UCF isn't who I thought it was because it had done well against some lightweights. We got blown out against Colorado, and then didn't handle Florida, didn't handle the swamp well. So I still don't know how much better Florida's gotten and how much it has to do with the opposition. It's not planning to play Miami anymore. That was a brutal beatdown in the season opener. But UCF has been in the top 5 all year in rushing yards per game. And it had a little over 100 yards against Florida, like 170 rushing yards below its average. And Florida had been vulnerable to the run until that game. So that does speak to improvement. And in my mind, that some of those linemen for Florida are figuring things out. This team is getting better. So on the other side, Graham Mertz is a very accurate passer. I would guess he's leading the country in passing percentage. He's or close to it because the last 2 games he's hardly thrown an interception. But Florida doesn't do a lot of. They don't go deep a lot. It's a lot of dink and dunk, and they can control the clock that way. So it's more of a challenge than I thought it would be. Florida's doing some things a little better than I thought it would, but still Tennessee has an advantage here, and particularly playing at Neyland. I don't think I can talk Tennessee fans out of the anxiety, though. I mean, it is Florida. So
yeah, I think the Florida game, there was always going to be some anxiety around the Florida game. It's just Tennessee fans needed to know the source of that. Like what's supposed to make us nervous this week? And now it's the offense. It could have been something completely different. It could have been injury to a player or
sure.
or whatever. But now Tennessee fans have something to hang on to about why they feel so much anxiety going into Saturday. Yeah, I mean, if you look at it on like just numbers on paper, I think it's pretty clear what Tennessee needs to do. Florida's rush defense is 15th in the conference. Its pass defense also is 13th in the conference, so not much better. But yeah, they got bludgeoned by the run against, was it A&M and then Mississippi State. But yeah, they had the improvement against UCF. So I think Tennessee almost needs to test that out. Tennessee's offensive line is better going downhill running the ball. It's tackles. The difference, we've talked a lot about Hurd and Campbell, the difference in how they are pass blocking versus run blocking is an enormous chasm between those two. They're okay run blocking. They've been bad pass blocking. So you know, and you have Dylan Sampson, maybe the best running back in the conference, one of the best in the country right now. So it looks like to me you need to go 2 tight ends, have a simple passing game or a little more simplified passing game, 2 tight ends, which they've had success with, run the ball, and just see if Florida can stop you like they did UCF, or if you can run the ball on them like Mississippi State did. You know that, then you can sort of go to the next phase of it. You know, Graham Mertz and DJ Lagway, it is a funny thing because Mertz gave them trouble last year. He was very controlled and accurate. Lagway looks like they could give him more issues because he can run. He can throw it anywhere on the field. There's a little bit of Nico in him, but I'd say more like a poor man's Milroe, Jalen Milroe. So he's high risk, high reward. And I don't know how that works out for Tennessee. It could work out really, really well or really, really poorly. But I do think I think the reaction to this game, if uses this game, I can't imagine what Saturday night will be like and what this podcast will be like next week. If Tennessee wins the game, though, I think we're going to have a lot of Tennessee fans saying the plan that you just implemented against Florida, why didn't you do that against Arkansas in the second half last week? I think we'll hear some of that, which would probably be reasonable criticism. I think also if Tennessee wins this game, there'll probably be some overreaction to individuals, or maybe it'll be reasonable reaction because Squirrel White was injured in the Arkansas game, had a sling around his shoulder. Brew McCoy hurt his hand in the Arkansas game, had some type of wrap. I don't know if it was a cast, but it was some kind of wrap or brace at the end of the game. We'll know more later in the week, but Josh Heupel said those guys did not have season-ending injuries, but he certainly didn't say we're going to have them this week for the Florida game. So there's a reasonable chance that both of those guys are out, and so we could see. I think that's even more reason to see 2 tight ends out there. But is Ethan Davis their split tight end? Is he going to catch more balls? Are we going to see the 5-star Mike Matthews more, and he may have a couple of big plays? Is this Chris Brazel's breakout game? Do we see more Dante Thornton downfield? Chaz Nimrod would be your starting receiver if Squirrel is out, so you could see some things from him. So I think there is reason to believe that we'll have overreaction of an individual player this week stepping forward if guys are injured or limited, or maybe this is just a chance where a outplays the guy he's replacing, and then that opens up a whole new categories of possibilities for the Alabama game. I don't know, but Tennessee has to figure out how to win this game and then just reset completely for the Alabama week. John, do they only need to win this game to feel good going into the Alabama game, or do they need to win it and look good?
I think it would obviously help if they look good doing it, because the Arkansas loss will linger for a while because the ramifications of that defeat were significant. We're talking about the playoff. Tennessee wins that game against Arkansas. It's in great playoff shape. That's how we frame a season now is are you in the running for the playoffs? How good are your chances? So, but it is Florida, and Florida's track record 17-2 in the last 19 games against Tennessee. So you can't feel bad if you beat Florida. And you also have to keep in mind is how people look at Alabama. It just lost to Vanderbilt. and it fell apart defensively in the second half against Georgia and almost blew a game it seemingly had a tight grip on. So, yeah, I do find it interesting how you characterize Tennessee's best path to victory in this game. You're talking about 2 tight ends and running the ball. That's a long way from what we think of as Josh Heupel football, the offense that struck fear into the SEC in 2022. I just find it interesting that might not work in this game. And you say reboot. I didn't think we'd be at that point 5 games into Josh Heupel's 4th season.
So I guess the good news for Tennessee is that every year it has, under Josh Heupel, it has one of these road games where it just lays an egg, and they don't have another road game till Georgia, so they're at home for like a month. So that's good news. They've got that game out of the way, and they can sort of get their mojo back in Neyland, and we'll see if they can do that. I'll be at Neyland on Saturday night. You can. We thank you for listening to this pod. Share it with your friends, share it on social media. Certainly subscribe to it. Follow our coverage of the game and all week at KnoxNews.com. And thanks for listening to this edition of the Volunteer State.